I really think this is time now for everybody, our country, to come together. We want to come together, whether it's Republican or Democrat or liberal or conservative. It would be so nice if we could come together and straighten out the world and straighten out the problems and straighten out all of the death and destruction that we're witnessing. That's practically never been like this. It's just so important. And I want to make that a very big part of our message. We're going to come together.
As of this moment, we are going to suspend this presidential campaign. And this is going to have to be, there is no path for me to be the next president absent things that we don't want to see happen in this country. And I'm also making the decision that this has to be an America First candidate in that White House. As I've said since the beginning, there are two America First candidates in this race. And earlier tonight, I called Donald Trump to tell him that I congratulate him on his victory. And now going forward, he will have my full endorsement for the presidency. And I think we're going to do the right thing for this country.
All right, folks. Well, Donald Trump wins the Iowa caucus by a huge margin. It was never close. It was never in question. Also, Ron DeSantis narrowly edges out Nikki Haley for second place, and Vivek Ramaswamy drops out of the presidential race and formally endorses Donald Trump. Kind of sad, but probably the right time, the right move to make. Folks, we got to talk about all of that and more in today's recap video on the Iowa caucus. So obviously last night we did the stream. We gave you the results live and talked about them. I figure this morning we might as well do one final video wrapping this all up. So with that said, let's get into that. But first, folks, be sure to leave a like on the video and subscribe to the channel if you are new. We are currently on the push for 300,000 subscribers. So if you enjoy the political content, if you enjoy the conservative stuff, be sure to hit that red subscribe button down below. And with that said, let's just get into this. I figure I'll just talk about the takeaways for each major candidate. I mean, I'm not going to give Ryan Binkley, Asa Hutchinson, or much less Chris Christie the time of day here. But, you know, we'll go in order. We'll just talk about the takeaways for each person. So, obviously, biggest story of last night, Trump doesn't just win the Iowa caucus, he dominates the Iowa caucus, right? Won it by basically close to 30 points here. The race was called within 30 minutes. He's going to finish with over 50% of the vote. And folks, this is exactly what I said you want if you are Donald Trump, right? The narrative going into this race has been, this is Donald Trump's nomination already, right? And you wanted to remove any doubts of that, because obviously the DeSantis supporters, the Haley supporters, the Vivek supporters even were saying maybe the polls are lying. Maybe there is actually sort of a rebellion or a disgruntlement with Donald Trump, and maybe he's no longer the ringleader of this party. And while the path to victory for Trump has always seemed pretty clear, this is what you needed to end the primary as soon as possible, right? Because if you're Trump, you don't want to take this all the way to the summer, still trying to campaign against the other Republicans. You want to be putting all your focus into Joe Biden already. And the only thing that was going to be possible at doing that was a huge 30, and I said this last night, right? You want a huge 30-point victory. You want to get over 50% of the vote. That is exactly what happened, as you see here looking on the map. He's won all but one county in the state of Iowa, and that one county, I don't know if there's still votes left to count as of this morning, but Nikki Haley beat him by one vote, and that's in a small college town. So obviously, that tells you the whole story. And I think, folks, we can officially make a projection, not just about this one election, but about the whole race in general, that Donald Trump will be the Republican nominee. I think this result officially shows you that the entire primary is over. There is virtually no path to victory for any of the other remaining candidates. DeSantis put all of his resources into the state of Iowa. He was really going hard to try to get an upset in the state. Didn't come close. Nikki Haley may have something to do in New Hampshire and even South Carolina, but beyond that, the map does not look great. And so in many ways, not only is this a physical victory for Trump, but this is the moral victory that you wanted. Because I thought if Trump even won the Iowa caucus, but it was by a very narrow margin, that may be a victory on paper. But in many ways, it's a moral defeat. It's a moral victory for whoever came in second place, right? Because it sows the seeds of doubt that might hey, weaken Donald Trump's image as this dominant frontrunner and might get people starting to think, hey, maybe there are other viable options. But Trump last night totally defeated any of those narratives. And like I said, the primary is basically over. And if you watched Trump's victory speech last night, this sentiment was basically summed up, right? He did not waste any time attacking any of the other Republicans. In fact, he sort of praised them and thanked them for running a hard race. And I thought that was the right move, right? Because like I said, if the primary is over, you don't need to spend any time attacking Republicans. Your full focus needs to be on Biden. And that was basically his victory speech last night. He put most of the focus on Biden. Also, I thought gave a very unifying message. It was one of Trump's most uniting speeches that I've ever seen out of the guy, basically saying, look, we live in a great country with great people. It's time for us to all come together, which I think, again, is the perfect messaging. There's no need to dunk on the DeSantis voters, the Haley voters, the Vivek voters. Now is the time to try to just bring them all home by showing them in the election, hey, it's not a viable path to victory. Time to all get behind this candidate. It was the right move. It was a great speech. And it was a great speech that came after a great performance. So yeah, he's going to be the nominee. I don't know what else to say about that other than to the people who are opposed to the idea of Trump being the nominee, which I never was. But I mean, at this point, it's reality. It's going to happen. So I say to those people who liked another candidate, the similar thing Donald Trump said, which is, look, I get it, but it's time to unite now as a party. It's time to unite now as a movement. That's about all there is to say. Anyways, moving on here from the other candidates, though, or moving on from Donald Trump, I should say, Ron DeSantis, I guess this is the second subplot of last night to talk about. There was this big debate on who's going to come in second place, right? DeSantis, for a while, obviously, I think everyone expected he's going to come in second, not just in Iowa, but basically in the entire race. But as you've known, Nikki Haley, as of late, the neocon warmongering shill that we absolutely do not like on this channel. I know, newsflash, right? Vince Dow, not a fan of Nikki Haley. Yeah, everyone knows this. But, there was talk about her maybe coming in second place. The polls were very close here. Well, it is official, folks. Ron DeSantis, very narrowly by a margin of about over 2,000 votes, has fended off the threat from Nikki Haley. Okay, so Ron DeSantis coming in second, Nikki Haley coming in third. A lot of people on both sides are taking a victory out of this, right? Some people are saying they're happy. Hey, Nikki, you suck. You came in second. You came in third place. They're saying about Ron DeSantis, they're saying, well, look, it's a moral victory for him. He didn't lose to Nikki Haley. To which I say on both sides, I don't know if there's anything along those lines you can really read into that. Because first of all, let's just start from DeSantis. Obviously, you're going to see some of the DeSantis influencers who are still trying to shift the goalposts and pretend like their guy is going to win, make excuses about this, saying that like, well, look, we actually came in second place, guys. Here's the problem for DeSantis is you can shift the goalposts now and pretend like, hey, DeSantis was only running to get his name out there, in which case, yes, this is a good performance. But I think back to 2023, when the guy first announced his campaign. The Ron DeSantis campaign was never about being heard. It was never about getting yourself out there. Ron DeSantis's goal in this entire campaign, and the reason people were backing him, was they were expecting him to be a serious contender to possibly upset Donald Trump. And I think when you see, okay, he came in second place, good for him. I thank him very much for that. I was saying I don't want Nikki Haley to come in second. I think Trump people, DeSantis people, we can both agree on that, right? But the idea that DeSantis was somehow making a serious play to actually be the nominee here. Yeah, he came in second, but it wasn't even a close second. I don't see how you can still justify that at this point. And of course, people are going to pretend like that was never the goal of DeSantis, but of course it was the goal. DeSantis wasn't in this to get his name out there. DeSantis was in this to win. And in that regard, it was not a victory in that regard at all. It shows, hey, emphatically, he's not going to win. As for the Nikki Haley front, truthfully, am I happy she came in third place? Yes. But in an ideal Republican Party, folks, this should have never been that close. Even her getting 20%, coming close to DeSantis, her making a threat even in Iowa to come in second. That shouldn't be the case. I'm actually kind of disappointed by that, right? Am I necessarily surprised? Not really. But I think even her getting close to 20% of the vote shows that 1 in 5 people in this Republican Party still don't get it, right? Yeah, I'm happy she lost. Haha, we'll dunk on her, and we'll dunk on her in a second. Don't worry. But at the same time, you do got to give her some credit in the regard that clearly she is showing that there is still a neocon minority in this party that are still stuck in the politics of 2003. They're in the dark. They're, shills to cable news or whatever. I don't know, but they just don't get it. And so while I'm happy she came in third, I'm also disappointed she got as many of the votes as she did. And I'm disappointed that, Vivek didn't get more votes than her, which, I wasn't expecting that to happen, but it would have been nice to see. And so I certainly hope going forward, the vision I want to push for is a Republican Party where Nikki Haley never comes close to 19%. A Republican Party where Nikki Haley is getting Jeb Bush numbers the way that she should, and the way that anyone that corrupt, anyone that much of a warmonger, anyone that much of a shill for the old establishment is. With that said, I do want to dunk on her really quickly here, because she said probably one of the dumbest things I've ever heard her say, where she says, and this was in her victory speech or whatever, she says, tonight, Iowa made this Republican primary a 2-person race. And she said this in like a victorious tone. Take a listen here.
I can safely say tonight, Iowa made this Republican primary a 2-person race.
So this is very similar to the Nikki Haley high heels comment. This is another baffling statement that nobody knows what it means. What the heck are you talking about? It's like, okay, Nikki. You said Iowa made this Republican primary a 2-person race. Well, you came in 3rd place. Okay? If we've suddenly forgotten, bird brain, let's look at the actual margin here. Again, and credit to you, I guess, for getting 19%, right? That's more than you should have got, but fine. But if you're saying that Iowa, in a victorious tone, made this primary a 2-person race, Nikki, Ron DeSantis came in 2nd. You came in 3rd. So if it's a 2-person race, that means you're not in it. You're not a contender for it. So I don't know what that means. Again, one of the dumbest things I've ever heard her say, because what the heck? Look at the math. I don't see how that makes any sense, but it is what it is. It wouldn't be Nikki Haley if she didn't say something stupid. So this is very true. She, of course, also said in that concession speech, basically that, if you're tired of the politics of old, if you're tired of the status quo, that's Donald Trump. Vote for me. I'm someone new. Basically said all of those things. And it's like, Nikki, you represent the establishment. You were the same corrupt politician that they are, okay? Going back to the politics of 2003, going back to the party of George Bush, which you personify entirely, besides the fact that you're in high heels. Oh, look, it's a different face. She's younger. If you have the same exact politics as 2003, that is not something new, okay? That is actually, by definition, as close as it could get to a return of the status quo. Okay, so I don't understand that at all. But yeah, again, Nikki Haley comes in 3rd place. Again, people will say, haha, Trump won all 98 counties except for 1. Okay, well, I'm disappointed Nikki Haley won a single county. Yes, it was by 1 vote. Yes, it was in a college town. Still, okay, folks, I like to win big. I like to win big. And yes, Trump won big. But the fact that Haley didn't get completely embarrassed, considering her expectations, that's not good news. It's not good news. We still have work to do in terms of waking people up in this party. Lastly, folks, the final story, and maybe the one a lot of my viewers on this channel came for, Vivek Ramaswamy. I mean, let's just say it. He did actually outperform his RCP average in the polls by like 1 point or so. But I mean, let's be real. Came in 4th place, and last night never seemed close to even coming in 3rd place. He finishes with 7.7% of the vote and 3 delegates. I wish she did better. I really do. But as I sort of talked about going into that stream, a lot of people I think are probably kind of mystified by this. It's like, well, Vivek was working so hard. So many people liked him. How did he only get 7%? Well, I'll just break that down objectively for you. I don't like that this is the case. Obviously, I just spent like 5 minutes dunking on Nikki Haley and talking about how there are so many people in our party that still just don't get it. But on the front of Vivek Ramaswamy, I think two things explain his performance. I think number one is the fact that Trump is in the race, right? And I think what you saw last night as a whole, there's a lot of people who like DeSantis and Trump at the same time. And on that same regard, there's a lot of people who like Vivek and Trump at the same time, I think. But considering, as we learned last night, Donald Trump is still seen as the number one and Donald Trump is still seen as the ringleader, I think that probably has something to do with a lot of Vivek's performance, right? If Trump weren't in the race, if this were a truly open field, I think he does much better. But I don't think that explains the whole performance. I think the other part you see from this is that the internet is not real life. And in this case, I kind of wish it was, but as you can tell, it's not, right? And I think although Vivek is very popular in our sort of circle in the conservative movement, the content consumers, the people who follow it online and are super engaged and involved in it, I think when you think of the actual mainstream Republican electorate, I mean, think about who are your Republican voters. For the most part, they're older people. They're people who watch a lot of cable news, right? That's sort of your average Republican voter. And I think if you have not spent as much time on Twitter or YouTube or even Facebook, right, kind of watching him, listening to him, I think you probably would get a very different perception of who he is or how serious he is, or the only thing you learn about him is maybe a 30-second cable news soundbite. And frankly, in the vast majority of those cases, corporate media has been against him, right? Fox News, in my opinion, has not treated him all that graciously, and same goes for the other mainstream news outlets out there, right? So in many ways, I just think that's what happened last night, okay? And it's sad. I think it shows in many ways the grassroots of this movement has work to do. But frankly, it is what it is. I still like Vivek. I think he has a bright future going forward. And, I'm going to do a video maybe later today, actually breaking down the decision for him to drop out. Was it the right decision? So I'm not going to touch on that heavily here today, but I will mention he did drop out of the race after this. And I think in many ways, that was the right move. It's disappointing. It's sad, but at least he's gracious in that defeat, unlike these other two clowns who are pretending like, hey, we're on to victory, guys. Like, no, you're not, right? I think he did the right thing as a man to say, clearly, there's no path to victory for me, which Iowa shows there's not, right? Because he basically did very similar within the margin of error in terms of what he was polling at. That seems to suggest, it's not going to be a miracle in any of these other states either. He's not going to beat Donald Trump. He's not going to be the nominee. But he also says, okay, well, we're going to do what's best for the country and best for the movement. And so he immediately drops out, endorses Donald Trump. And, I think that's the right move, because while I did get Vivek's argument about staying in the race in case they take Trump out of the race, right? You got to kind of be the backup quarterback. Hey, what are you going to do if they get rid of Trump? They might try to make Haley the nominee. I got to be in this race. While I've always understood that argument, and I was wondering what Vivek would pursue in that regard, I think at the same time, considering he only got 7%, what kind of look would it be if he just stubbornly stayed in the race and kept getting 7%, 6%, 5%? I think, first of all, people might start to grow a more negative opinion of him than if he just got out now, right? And then secondly, I think more importantly, if he wants a future role in the Trump White House, which I think most of us agree we want to see that happen, whether it's the VP or in the White House working a cabinet position, we want the guy to have a future in power, absolutely. it might have also rubbed Donald Trump the wrong way if he just stayed in the race all the way to the convention and kept just nagging at his heels, getting like 5-6%. Whereas now he sees it, he sees where it's headed. You drop out, you endorse Donald Trump. He will actually be doing a rally with Trump later today in New Hampshire. That's exactly the right move. It's the right move for him personally. It protects his political future. It looks very bright. No one has anything bad to say about him. But on top of that, also, it's best for the movement, right? Because obviously Vivek, he good on him for staying in the race till Iowa, right? See how you do. Don't listen to the pressure before that to drop out. But now that he has seen how he did, right? Now is definitely the time for him to just fall in behind Trump, endorse Trump, help Trump not just win the nomination, which he's going to do anyway, but try to win the general election in November. And look, I think Vivek campaigning for Trump will absolutely be a great thing. Not just because he's popular, not just because he's a great speaker, very articulate, sort of presents a different image personally than Trump, whereas still kind of sharing the ideology there. But I also think the underrated aspect of Vivek is how hard of a worker he is when it comes to campaigning. I mean, you saw what he did in Iowa. Way more events than any other candidate. He was blitzing hard. His ground game was very aggressive. He put in a lot of work. And look, the Trump campaign could use that, right? It's great to have someone who can run around. And frankly, I don't know if it would be seen as usurping power or whatever, but if I were the Trump campaign, I would say to Vivek, I would say, look, not only can you campaign alongside Trump at his rallies, but if you want to do your own events on behalf of Donald Trump, right? Like secondary campaign events, running around all the swing states, doing your own rallies, but for Trump, that's absolutely fine, right? Because he can do like 10 rallies a day. You saw how hard he worked in Iowa. That's a resource Trump could definitely use very effectively. And it would only add to a ground game that I think you saw in Iowa from Trump is already very strong. And I think that's good news for November. Hey, it was very organized. You took care of business. You did everything you need to do. That's going to matter in November, too, when you got to do the ground game against Biden. And I think Vivek can add a lot to that. So, yeah, that basically wraps up the summary here, folks, of the Iowa caucus. Again, Donald Trump wins big. He's going to be the nominee. You can like that. You cannot like that. But ultimately, he's the only shot at this point to defeating Biden. So my suggestion to the TDS Trump derangement syndrome crowd in our movement is like, okay, I get it. You've made your case. Time to get over it. Okay. The same is true of the Vivek crowd, right? And I don't think anyone in the Vivek crowd's going to struggle with that. But, look, we did our best. You tried. Now it's time to just get behind Trump. That's what it's time to do. It's time to unite, like he said in his speech last night. But all right, folks, with that said, let me know your thoughts on everything we saw last night. Do you think my assessments are accurate? Be sure to let me know. Leave a like on the video. Subscribe to the channel if you are new. And until next time, Alpha moves only. God bless. Have a very good day and peace.